All right, let's get started. Let me let these women in. All right, welcome, ladies.
Send me a screenshot.
Welcome, ladies. Hi, Sonia. Hi, Natalie. We're here today. We're going to do a quick power lunch here. We're talking about menopause and our mental well-being. I know both Nat and Sonia are on their phones at very precarious positions. So we do know that the internets are going to trip in and out, but that's okay. We're going to go with it. So welcome, Sonia. Before we jump into our questions, I'd love you to introduce yourself, what you do, where you work. And then what I'll do is we can pop in the chat. You know how anybody can get in touch with you.
Okay, great. So let me do a quick test. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes,
ma'am. Yeah, great. Okay, well, hello. I'm Sonia Wynter. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist operating in Kingston. I'm the CEO and founder of a private practice called Tea House Therapy. It's a practice of 13 psychologists. We focus on adults and couples, you know, where most of our certifications are in couples therapy and in individual mental health disorders as well. Tea houses, we say tea house is where compassion lives. And so a major mantra that we have is about not only being compassionate, but we are about acceptance and meeting people wherever they are, making sure that once they walk in through the door, they feel like they're at home and they're in a very safe space. Just physically, they can feel that way, and then we try to, you know, engender that emotionally. Let's see what else. We do a lot of therapy virtually as well. I would say we do maybe 65% of our hours are virtual hours. So some of there's one psychologist who's not even in Jamaica. She's in Guadeloupe, and others are across the island. We're all ladies, and I'm dying to recruit a gentleman, you know, particularly because the clients that we see. Okay, I will. Thank you so much. You're going to be here though. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Okay, and that's where you'll be. All right, wonderful. Okay, I'm so sorry about that. Natalie, and I didn't get to tell you, I'm actually in Black River at the moment. Did I say that? Yes. So we're volunteering. There are 4 tea house therapy psychologists in St. Elizabeth today. So I'm at a health center. So that's all the racket that you're hearing. People have come here. We're doing a mental health clinic in Black River, Junction, Santa Cruz, and then as soon as we're done here, they're waiting for me. As soon as we're done here, we're gonna go to Treasure Beach. So there's gonna be a lot of activity around, you know.
That sounds awesome.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you.
We're thankful that you found the time to be with us today, because what you're doing is amazing, Sonia. It's needed down.
Thank you so much. Yes, it is. It is absolutely, absolutely. So we're providing psychological first aid, as it were, you know. So that's another thing we do, you know. We try our best to respond to needs such as our skill set will allow you.
Awesome.
So that's Tea House.
That's Tea House. Awesome. That's amazing, Sonia. Thank you for that. All right, so let's just jump straight into menopause. We're talking about, the whole topic is menopause, mental health. So we've known about all the different effects of menopause on our mental health. Give me an idea of how it exactly impacts our mental health, because we talk about the hot flashes, we talk about all those physical things. Let's go a little bit into how it really affects our mental space. What shows up? What serious stuff can come up?
I think the way that I think about menopause and mental health is thinking of it in terms of menopause affecting mental health in 2 ways. One, that's a directly impacting. There's a direct correlation between what's happening to us and menopause. but also between mental health and menopause. But then there's also an indirect route where what's happening to us physiologically is also affecting our mental health, you know? So when you think about the direct implications of menopause on mental health, the mere fact that these two important hormones, estrogen and progesterone, they're fluctuating in such dramatic ways. Those two hormones have a regulation of important neurotransmitters, and for example, dopamine and serotonin and so on. And so those important neurotransmitters, as a result, play an important role in managing mood. And so that's a direct correlation of what happens, you know, the mere fact that this hormone is decreased, these two hormones are decreasing, they then influence these neurotransmitters, and those neurotransmitters are directly related to our ability to regulate our emotions and so on. And that's very important when it comes to dealing with stress. Okay, so if nothing else was affecting us, if our bodies were not affected by menopause in any way, the mere fact that these two hormones are so significant in influencing the quality of our mental health, right, would mean that we can suffer the immediate and direct impact on our mental health simply because of those two hormones. Now, there's an indirect way in which menopause affects us. It still has to do with those hormones, in that it changes a lot for us. Now, first of all, everybody knows about the hot flashes, right? So one of the things about hot flashes is that it disturbs your sleep. But as I said earlier, estrogen also is related to serotonin, and that's a hormone, a neurotransmitter, that really influences the quality of our sleep. Now, once you sleep, we know how much sleep and the lack of sleep deprivation can affect mood as well. All right. So if we think about it in terms of layers, all right, our mood in and of itself is dysregulated, number one. Okay. Then our sleep, our ability to regenerate, our ability to sleep can be a very therapeutic endeavor, let's say, and that ability being impaired is another layer to that impacts our mental health, you know. Then the manner in which our bodies change, okay, the mere fact that our bone density is affected, the ability of our musculature to come in. Hi there. Hey, greetings. You're here to the clinic? Oh, they were here a second ago. I think they've gone over to the hospital. They're kind of distributed across to the hospital across the road. We're here to see some of the staff members who are having a tough time. The mental health, yes. So the psychosocial, we're part of the psychosocial team. Experience here. Oh, I see. So I just came from my assessment today. Okay. Okay. Wednesday, but because of the hurricane. Right. All right. All right. You're okay. Bye bye. So sorry about that.
It's okay.
Yes. So where was I? I was talking about the fact how your body changes. Okay.
Right.
So the mere fact that your bone density changes, that affects mobility, you know, and so we used to be able to do that are a lot more challenging to be able to do now, and that affects mood. You know, that can affect your whole sense of self and who I am, my agency, what I can accomplish, and the same and more so for the fact that estrogen plays an important role in the regeneration of muscle cells as well, you know.
Right.
And so, you know, muscle elasticity, etc., that changes. And so physiologically, just looking at us with all things remaining equal, our body is changing right in front of our very eyes, you know what I mean? A lot of particularly around our stomach area, that exactly, belly fat and so on, as a result of these hormones that's changing and that's hard to do. That's hard for so many women to sit and just watch themselves changing in the mirror, right in front of their very eyes. And then again, how we look, what's happening to us, the body that we know so well changing in front of us, it attacks again our sense of self, you know, and that has a direct impact on our mood and on our mental health. The other thing about menopause that is directly correlated with mental health challenges is the mere fact that menopause often coincides with other dramatic life changes, right? Such as empty nesters. That's often, for many of us, there's a high correlation with that's the time when our children are leaving the nest. And again, our sense of self, depending on how involved you were, depending on how you saw your role as a mom, as a caregiver, when they leave, again, who am I? What am I about? What's my purpose? What can I do now? That can be something those are questions that might be difficult to answer, and that can affect our mental health. Oh, also, and at this age, during menopause too, is when a lot of women become part of what we call the sandwich generation. So we're looking after our aging parents, and we're looking after teenagers. Those are two age groups that are extremely challenging to manage, to take care of. Adolescent, young adults, adolescents, and aging parents who have their own challenges as well. And so that the fact that those times of our life often coincides with the menopause years has a huge impact on our mental health. So I would say that, let's see, did I forget anything? Could I forget? How could I forget? I wonder why. Brain fog. Hello. Again. I wonder why I forgot that. Anyway, so the fact, you can imagine, it's the most frustrating thing, that not to be able to find words, not to be able to remember things. I have to share something with you all where, there's a group in my car this morning. There are 4 of us psychologists driving down together, and I'm by far the eldest and the only one who has gone through menopause, right, in the car. And so I'm saying to them, guys, I can't remember. What's that food stop place that we would stop at on the way to Ocho Rios, where we would get all that great roadside food? I can't remember. Of course, they don't remember. They're much younger, and I could not remember the name. And just to see a difference in generation at work here, I'm struggling. They don't know what I'm talking about. So one of them just goes on to social media and says, who remembers this place? You know what I mean? And so in 5 minutes, Faith Spen is the name of the place. And then when the word comes to you, it's like, hello, hooray, life is worth living again, sort of a thing. It was Faith Spen. Yes. But you can imagine that kind of feeling of inadequacy that can come with that, like in the workplace. Absolutely. when you can't, which can be such a competitive environment, you know what I mean, and you just feel like you're not firing on all cylinders in the same way. You can't. It takes you longer to accomplish the same tasks. Because cognitively as well, you are changing. Let's say that. And then and that, just that sense of inadequacy that comes, there can be, that's a hit to your mental health right there. Your sense of self. It's all about, how do I see myself? How do I see my purpose?
Yeah.
How do people see me? This is a time also when relationships are high level of intimate partner dissatisfaction at this age as well. Not only because we're under a lot of stress, a lot of times our relationship is at that level where it can become more fragile. So there's a lot of divorce and separation at this age as well. You know what I mean? Then of course there's how much menopause affects sex as well, vaginal dryness and so on. That can affect the relationship as well. So it's all about, how do I now see myself, and how do people see me? What am I able to do? How much did I define myself by what I was able to do before, who I was before. And now that those things are changing, I'm kind of left dangling, and I need to redefine myself. I mean, in a perfect world, we can redefine ourselves, but without that, our mental health can really be undermined because of all these realities hitting us at the same time. So let me catch my breath.
Yeah. So, no, thanks for a lot of that, and a lot of that makes sense. And I like how you positioned the concerns in terms of layers. Like some are directly hormonally related, and then some are sort of like the byproducts. Because as you talk about the serotonin. And then the sleep, and then we know about the weight gain, but when we're not sleeping, we tend to gain weight as well, so all of these things it really is sort of like a perfect storm in a teacup, as it were.
Yes. Yes.
a
cocktail. A cocktail of events.
A horrible cocktail, not the kind we enjoy.
For sure.
What I wanted to zero in on a little bit is the feelings of anxiety, the feelings of depression, the feelings of crankiness, the feelings of overwhelm. These are the things that I think are sort of like the baseline thing that makes all the other things a little harder to deal with. When we're well rested, we can manage stress. When we're not, we're a little crankier than we would normally be. I mean, I know some women who have started hormone replacement therapy, and not saying yea or nay, we're not doctors here, and we're not making a blanket statement in support of or against, but some of my clients tell me that their children are telling them, my goodness, mommy, you're nicer, what is different? And one of the things is they start to support their hormones. So what I really wanted to ask at this point, Sonia, is when it comes to the things of anxiety and depression and overwhelm and the heart palpitations that go along with that, how do I know that it's menopause and not just life?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, typically, by the time women reach to menopause, hopefully they already have a sense of their baseline mental health, So coming into menopause, I have a sense of whether anxiety is something I've struggled with my whole life, number one. Okay, so so that's one giveaway. If you have an idea of your history with menopause and with anxiety and depression, you can know that part of it is my history. I've lived with this, and coped with these disorders all my life. And menopause maybe adding another layer, making it much more stressful for me to cope, And so I enter into this new phase, and it's even more difficult for me, as it were, So that kind of change can give you a hint that, we can almost section out, as it were, the influencing factors,
Makes sense. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Right. And then the other thing about really knowing, it's about going to your physician to tell you the truth, and actually doing the test, the physiological test that can help you. A huge thing, though, is I think what makes a big difference is, Natalie, is programs such as this, because just knowing about it, knowing what to expect, I can't tell you. It's coincidentally, over the last 7 weeks, I've been on the radio on Tuesdays and Thursdays with Paula and Porto, and we've been talking about menopause, right? And I can't tell you how many phone calls come in as soon as the program is finished. People just feel, so many women, they feel normalized. Like, okay, I wasn't just, it normalizes the experience that they're having. You know what I mean? So education and knowledge makes a huge difference when you see all of these symptoms lined up in front of you. Suddenly, there's a language for what I'm experiencing. You know what I mean? And it makes sense to me almost. And so it's almost like you finally recognize what was you recognize the stranger in your midst. And that's the kind of giveaway. So education and awareness, awareness of the symptoms can kind of give you a hint, as it were, that can get you to go to your doctor and get a proper diagnosis as to what's going on with you.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Nats. I just want, before we move on to a different thing, because I love that you brought up about that whole anxiety and depression, Natalie, question, because what if somebody does have a history of depression? or has battled it or is currently battling it, and menopause now hits. What she doesn't, how do we manage that? How does she manage that? Where does
Yeah.
she go to deal with that? Because that's a real thing that women do suffer from depression, and then menopause is just going to heighten it. So
For sure, for
what
sure.
does she do at that point?
Okay, I think it's a multiplicity of responses that I would give to you. I think a lot would depend on how has she been handling these disorders to this point. Okay, has she just kind of lived with it and really not just been in a substandard, a suboptimal way of life for the last 20 years? Number one. Number two, has she had the benefit of therapy, which has given her coping skills? That would be a factor that would influence what she would do come menopause years. Has she had a pharmacological intervention? Is she on medication, psychiatric medication to help her? Depression or anxiety across the years, that's going to influence. Hopefully, such an individual, such a woman would have a very satisfying relationship with her doctor, with her psychiatrist, and that would influence what happens thereafter. So with anxiety and depression and the advent of menopause, you have options. You have options for therapy, you have options for medication, you have options just to learn tools about how to cope with it. And many of those interventions would be the same with menopause as it would have been prior to menopause, in any case, in dealing with these disorders. They're important lifestyle changes that can make a huge difference. Number one,
Yes.
managing your sleep, your activity level, your diet, that can really make a huge difference. And then, as
Your
I said,
alcohol intake,
alcohol, smoking, etc., etc., etc. Can I share this with you? I was in
Yes.
a workshop over the weekend. It was a sex therapy for couples. A trainer that I was recertifying, going through, and the trainer said he's discovered that one of the most effective ways he has gotten his patients to stop smoking is to say to a woman, smoking is really bad for your clitoris and for your vulva. It's really bad because it impacts your vascular infrastructure. Okay,
Right.
Smoking does, right? So does excessive alcohol, right? So you are doing damage to those very important organs in your body. And say the same, say the same to a man. Smoking has a direct impact on the functioning of your penis, right? Because it's affecting your vascular functioning. And he was just reporting remarkable results. What does that have to do with anything? So lifestyle, just wanted to underscore what you were saying, Natalie, alcohol, smoking, those sort of things. Those are interventions that would help you if you had depression before and anxiety before, and they would certainly help you with the advent of menopause, when those disorders intensify.
Yep. I'd love to we use these words like anxiety and we use these words like depression, and very often we're not 100% of what they mean, right? And I'm going to give you, because I think personal shares are important because of a number of factors. And I used to have this feeling, you see, I still kind of do, of somebody strangling me. And I would go to the doctor and I would say to the doctor, I feel like somebody is strangling me. What does the doctor do? The doctor sends me for a thyroid scan to make sure that my thyroid is not enlarged. And all of this. And, we go round and around and around. And years later, we don't figure out anything until one day, I, doing a little search on the internet, recognized that a feeling of fullness in the throat is a symptom of anxiety, right? So now I go to the doctor and I say, I think I have anxiety. Now I get medication for anxiety, right? Now the feeling goes away. And then I learned that anxiety is related to perimenopause and menopause. So I talk to that doctor and then I go on the hormone therapy. And now guess what? if I don't take my anxiety medication, I still don't have the feeling. So I've sort of weaned myself off, and it was
Right.
really horrible. Now, this thing started way before I even thought about something called perimenopause, but
Yes,
clearly
yeah.
was going on from there. So I say that to say that we tend to know the feelings, like the typical sort of flagship symptoms of what anxiety and depression are, but I don't know if
Yes.
we all know like some of the nuanced, like we think of
Yeah.
anxiety of, oh, I'm nervous.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew
Mm-hmm.
anxiety was a feeling of fullness in my throat. And we think of depression as I cry a lot. So,
Right.
there's a lot of other things. Like, do we know that wanting more sleep than we normally, or not wanting to get out of bed because we're so tired, like that's a symptom, a possible
Mhm.
symptom of depression. So can you run us through some of what those things are like? Like, what do people
Right.
actually physically experience in their body?
Sure. Okay. Well, Natalie, I guess I just want to acknowledge that it's unfortunate that you almost had to launch yourself on a road of discovery as to what you were going through. I think that's unfortunate. You know what I mean? I think you were let down a little bit, because I mean, oops, 1 second. Don't go. I've done something. Okay,
There you
I'm
are.
back.
Got you.
Can you? Nope, I'm not back. But we're gonna figure
We're
this
hearing
out.
you. But we're hearing
We're
you.
hearing you.
All right. Yeah. Because typically, right, when all else fails, you've done all the physical tests, right? And you cannot come up with a diagnosis that's related to your physiology. The next natural step should be a mental health assessment. Okay, the next natural step should have been a mental health assessment. I mean, because mental health can cause a lot of physiological symptoms. I mean, that's what fibromyalgia is about, for example. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
and for many people too, more and more, they're even associating mental health with chronic pain. So my point is, I just want to say that I think that there's a battery of tests that you typically go through depending on what your complaint is. And ultimately, we should end up in the mental health realm if there are no physiological answers. You know what I mean? And why is my battery now dying? Okay. Now, in terms of symptomology, there's a criteria. Actually, I think now that I'm alone in the room, I can take out my headphones and plug in my battery. So there are specific criteria for depression, and that would say you're experiencing depression and for anxiety from a clinical diagnosis point of view. Okay, so depression, to be diagnosed clinically as having depression, you have to satisfy a number of criteria. Okay, it includes being extremely lethargic, right? So it has physiological symptoms such as lethargy. It also has a lot of, I would call them cognitive symptoms, in terms of how we actually see the world. So a lot of people, they're extremely pessimistic. Their ability to problem solve and see solutions in any stressors that they find themselves in is very, very, very difficult. So they've lost a sense. There's a high degree of a feeling of hopelessness. That's an emotional feeling that you have. There's a huge feeling also sometimes of worthlessness, like I'm just not worthy, in different ways. I'm actually going down the symptoms in my head. Of course, an overwhelming feeling of sadness. Now, all of these symptoms that I'm mentioning, by the way, must exist for a period longer than 2 weeks as well, so feeling upset and sad and tired because something has happened in your life, and it's doesn't make you depressed. Feeling terribly sad about something, feeling worthless and disappointed in yourself doesn't make you depressed in and of itself. However, if combined with that feeling of worthlessness and sadness, etc., it's extending for a period of longer than 2 weeks, then we start thinking about depression. And a huge symptom also is loss of interest in sex. That's a big or change in the degree of interest in sex. a change in your degree of interest in other people and in activities that you used to enjoy before. All right, there's no interest anymore in those things, in people or activities. That's another giveaway. Aha, changes in appetite, meaning you're either eating a lot more, such that over a period of 3 months, your weight changes by can change by up to 10%. So that change either going up or going down. All right, that's another symptom. The same for sleep. You're sleeping a lot more or you're sleeping a lot less. That's another symptom. And you have to satisfy, I believe it's about 6 or 10. I'm going to my screener here. Of these symptoms to be able to say that you actually are experiencing depression. And then, of course, in its worst form, you have a great desire to harm yourself and to end your life. That's in its worst form. I think those are the major ones that pop to mind right now. So there's feeling depressed by the by, I was overlooked for a promotion, or my business is going belly up, or something has happened and I feel discouraged and sad. That does not make me depressed necessarily, okay? But if all of those other things that I described before are also happening, then you will be formally diagnosed as depressed. Did that kind of answer your question as it relates to depression? Yeah?
Yeah.
Natalie? Oh, irritability, feeling really irritable and agitated, more so than usual. And another component about depression that I emphasize.
Have we lost Sonia?
I think we're losing her, yeah.
Yeah. Sonia, you want to turn off your camera just to see if it will pick up a little bit? Let's see if she clicks back on. Natalie, I love what you're talking about, that whole anxiety thing, because we know that with menopause, that is very real. And women experience anxiety and distress in so many different ways. You talked about the closing of the throat. People feel like they're having a heart attack. They go to cardiologists. They can't find anything wrong. And being able to identify something isn't right, as we've talked about in many of our episodes, and being able to go to a doctor, go to somebody, speak to somebody to ascertain, okay, is this hormones? Is this something that I really need to take further? I think is going to be, it has to be first and foremost, because we know that hormonal changes we know that hormonal changes during depression hormonal changes during menopause can cause depression. But when she talked about clinical depression versus I'm not feeling good, I don't feel worthy, and all of that.
Yes.
There's a difference. I think it's important that we don't. Yeah, but I think it's important that we don't blanket say, okay, so menopause causes depression.
Yeah. Oh, for sure, because everybody's experience is gonna be different, and it could maybe don't cause depression in you, but it may cause anxiety. It may don't cause anxiety, but it may cause irritability, and I just said to someone today, I said, that's why there's this sort of like how you think of miserable little old lady. Very often it's just our hormones just making us a little more irritable. It's like that mom of that teenager who said, Mom, all of a sudden you're a little nicer,
That's a big change. That's a big thing. That's a really big one.
Yeah. And I think because we're talking about relationships, and I'm not here to do obviously Sonia's work, but just while she's having her connection challenges, I think one of the really important things is for us to recognize, first of all, that maybe if we listen to the people that we love, and if they're saying, Mom, is everything okay? You're not as nice as you used to be. Or, maybe our partner is saying things that we instead of feeling defensive immediately, maybe we should listen and then stop and take a think, where maybe there really is something going on that I need a little help with. And then I find the communication is very beneficial the other way. So if you recognize that you're experiencing this, and I do this with my children quite often, I'll say, you know that mommy's getting older and mommy is having these feelings of overwhelm and whatever, and I explain to them. So I say, you know, if I've had a rough day and I come home, I love you playing music and dancing in the living room. I love it. But if I've had a rough day and I come home and the dog is barking and one kid is screaming at the other, and then the music is loud, and it becomes too much for me. So I can't manage it all at the same time until I kind of, you know, go have a moment and calm down. So I think letting our loved ones know what we're going through is, you know, we've said it in terms of the relationships before, in terms of the sex, but even just in terms of the interaction with children and partner. I think that communication is important, to let them know what we're experiencing and how they can help, you know?
Without a doubt. But it also, the onus is on us to recognize what we're going through and give it some validity. I think a lot of us women, we brush it off, we blame,
Yes.
we say it's because of this or because of that, rather than just owning our feelings and saying, I'm feeling crappy today, or I'm feeling irritable today, or I'm feeling whatever, and being able to share that. As I've always said to my clients, I said, our partners and our children are not mind readers. So being able to express, but it starts with us, Natalie, being able to own what it is that we're feeling, own it, not dismiss it, not just say whatever, own it, and go through it, and know that we have choices, we have options of for help.
We do. And that's why more and more I'm happy that more conversations, you know, Sonia saying that she's doing the work, Shani putting it out there, you and I putting it out there, like just having the conversation and taking away that stigma of no, we can't talk about that, you know?
Absolutely.
And there are avenues for support and avenues.
Yeah.
It's really important.
You're back.
Sorry about that.
I figured you're down in St. Elizabeth, so we totally understand you have connectivity issues. So you're good now?
Post hurricane.
Should I just pick up where I left off?
Sure, you can.
Hello?
Absolutely. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, right. So I was just trying to help all the ladies. The participants today are all ladies, is that right? Or do we have any trailblazing men?
No, not yet.
No,
not yet. No. We'll get there though, Sonia. We're working on it.
And that makes a difference, you know, because I'm going all over the place. I want to give you so much information in a short time.
Share.
Educating men is so very important as well, you know what I mean? Because to the extent that we can have emotional support from them, from our partners, our brothers, our parents, our adult sons, etc., our colleagues, our friends, that makes this journey just a whole lot more doable. And
we got lost her again. It's funny that she's just talking. You and I were just talking about relationships.
That can rob us of aid, you know.
Yeah, Sonia, what might help you is turn off your camera for a little bit and see if we can see if that helps. So that maybe you don't trip in and out so easily. Yeah, Sonia, I love that you're talking about the relationships, because that's what Natalie and I were just talking about, was being able to first own what we're feeling and be able to communicate with others what we're going through. So let's go in a little bit about that, about relationships and how to navigate that and move through that when we are feeling like, through menopause.
Yeah. So I think that it's interesting. Again, we have direct contributors to our relationships because of menopause, and then indirect contributors, you know. So a huge thing about that affects us in our relationships is that we as women can judge ourselves really harsh. You know, we can feel that feeling of inadequacy and fear and so on about what's happening to us, can really impact how we see ourselves and therefore how we show up in our relationship. You know what I mean? So there's that, as we kind of, we're really confronting our mortality in a way, you know what I mean? And that can really impact our how we see ourselves and our relationships. But then also the interesting thing is, or the difficult thing is that, as I said earlier, some of the symptoms of the very disorders are lack of interest in other people, you know? So we can feel a sense of numbness, for example, a sense of indifference or a sense of irritability. All of those things are direct outcomes of depression and anxiety. And of course, that's going to affect how we show up as well in our relationships. So how we see ourselves affects the relationship, but then how our partners, how our colleagues see us as well, you know, to the extent that they understand what's happening to us or don't understand, or just think, you know, how, you know, I don't know if this is still true, but you know how sometimes men can have this very sort of this unfortunate attitude to women when they're having their period and they're having these mood swings, for example. You know, men can have a very judgmental stance about that. Well, it's almost that can be almost on steroids sometimes. That kind of judgment can really escalate with menopause as well. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, she's going through menopause. She's become a crazy woman. She's a mad woman now just because of this menopause almost. You know what I mean? And so that will affect the relationship as well. And then, of course, there's the sex and how menopause affects sex, and, you know, not understanding it. Sometimes sex is one of the hardest things for two people to talk about, you know, particularly if it has to do with performance and so on. That's very difficult to talk about. And because menopause affects our, you know, our enjoyment, our level of desire, etc. The outcome is also an impact on our relationship. So it comes at us from many different angles.
So if we recognize that this is going on in our relationship, so we first of all recognize that this is going on in us, right? And then we recognize that this is something that's affecting our relationship, and we care enough about our relationship to you know, to take some action. What would we do? I mean, we've spoken about things like hormone replacements, about, you know, stabilizing what's going on in here. And I can always talk about natural supplements and whatnot, but from your perspective and your experience and your practice, what do you recommend for people that are going through these challenging times in their relationship as they get older together?
Sure. So recognizing it in ourselves, you got it right, Natalie. Recognizing it in ourselves gives us, and knowing what's going on with us, right, gives us then the opportunity to deal with it first and foremost in ourselves. Now, from the point of view of a psychologist, a woman who comes to me with emotional challenges around menopause, etc., the first thing that I'm going to work with her to do is, one, educate her as to the normalcy of what's happening to her. Try and normalize. The second thing that I'm going to work with her to do is to modify her attitude to what's happening to her. Okay? Because the women that are going to thrive in this situation are the women who can have self-compassion for themselves, right? Who can be very self-compassionate, who can kind of approach it with a kind of sense of humor. You know what I mean? You know, that can make a huge difference. And so that would be a huge attitude shift that I would try to help her through. Because, I mean, just think about the woman. You know, recently a woman she was trying to call her daughter, you know, one of her children. And so the name is slipping her. She said, I'm a mom. And then she says, remember that game we used to play, animal, food, place, thing, kind of, and she's going through, what is it? And she starts laughing, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like getting to a place where you're not taking yourself so seriously. It can be amusing, sort of a thing. So because sometimes what's happening to us is a challenge, but our attitude to what's happening to us is challenge number 2. It's layer number 2 that we have to attack, you know. So that's kind of where I would start. And then the same thing with partners, right? Helping them, the partners, or the partner in the relationship, to understand what's happening, and then modify their attitude as well. Okay, my husband and I have this joke. I say to him, Brian, let me tell you something. If you are in a room with any woman above the age of 45 and she says it's hot in here, the correct answer is yes, it's absolutely boiling hot. Do you understand me? That is the answer that you're to give. Okay, you know.
I think you need to have a course for men, Sonia. I think you need to just do a whole course just for men.
Absolutely, you know. And so to the extent that they can be more supportive, understanding, almost like it can become an inside joke, as it were. You know what I mean? Forgive me for just constantly talking about my husband so much, but he's a real gift, I have to tell you. Once I started having my hot flashes, you know what that gentleman did? I just noticed that there were these tiny hand round the electrical fans, these tiny fans just showing up at different places. So like on my side of the bed, right below the bedside table, there was this fan, and it was like I woke up in the night and oh yeah, there it is. And I grabbed it and sat the fan on my chest and turned it on. And then the next thing I know, a few weeks passed and a fan turned up beside my desk, kind of a thing. And I was like, oh God, it's like he was just paying attention, and it was just so compassionate and amusing and funny, you know. And I was like, oh, I ran out of fans. Do you think I could have another one right here by the toilet, please? That would really help me, kind of a thing, you know. So it's a kind of a, you know, you can see that the whole attitude towards this whole thing is changing, and it can be bonding. It can be really bonding. And that just makes it a whole different experience. You know, you can walk into it with more confidence. You can walk into it with more gratitude as well. But the biggest thing for me is walking into it with self-compassion.
You know, Sonia, I want to ask you a question, because that's all really, like, it's amazing. And you touched on this a little bit, and you talked about how we see ourselves, right? So we look in the mirror now and we look different, right? Some of us, we look older quicker. Some of us look older further down the road, but at some point we don't look like what we looked like in our 20s, right? There are lumps and bumps in places we never had lumps and bumps before. There's skin quality changes in places where we used to be tight and firm. And, you know, for somebody
hair loss, Natalie, hair loss.
Hair loss, gray hair, skin saggy, like boobs saggy, like our bodies are different, you know, and we're not yet at the place where we identify as little old lady, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So how do we, you said that you change, you help women reframe and one or two little tips that we can practice at home and start to love ourselves up a little bit more and start celebrating who we're becoming instead of wishing we were still young?
Yeah. So I most often, Natalie, what I help my practice, the psychotherapeutic model that I use is one that has two important prongs to it. One is it's a values laden approach. So a huge thing that I help women to do is to identify what their values are, which people are important to them, what endeavors are important to them, number 2. And then number 3, how do you want to show up? What's important to you in how you show up in these different domains of your life, okay? So let's say you are an entrepreneur who you're leading 3 or 4 people in your organization, or you're in a corporate entity where your career is an important part of who you are, let's say, okay? Then I help them to figure out, what curate, let's use that word. I help them to curate what are the qualities that they want to exhibit, okay? So do they want to be an inspiring director? Do they want to be a driven entrepreneur? What do they want to be a trailblazer? Or do they want to just be supportive, have a business going where they're supporting other people or they're creating new products, you know? What would make you feel a sense of value? So that's one thing. Similarly, in your relationships, how do you want to be able to describe yourself? What adjectives do you want to be able to use? Do you want to be a supportive person? Do you want to be a no-nonsense person? So I help people to define their values and help them to realize, listen, that's the most important. Your values are yours. Nobody gives them to you. What's important in terms of how you show up is something that's intrinsic to who you are. Okay, and that's what you want to preserve. That is who you are. Your character, your how you treat other people, how you treat yourself. Those are values that you want to be aware of. You want to crystallize, and that's how you are going to define yourself. Knowing those values and always trying to live up to those values is what's going to take you through different stress-related events. Okay, because a lot of times the activities that we used to use to define ourselves is changing. A lot of how we defined ourselves is changing. So I try to give them a more enduring way to define themselves, number one, you know, and then once you know that, you can come up with the kinds of activities, the day-to-day actions that will serve those values, as it were. Does that make sense? So, you know, if I want to be, let's say I want to now be supportive of my adult children, you know, sometimes that takes the last shred of self-control to be supportive of these crazy things that our adult children are doing. You know, we don't agree with them. You know what I mean? We're wondering whose child is this? Where did that come from? But we've decided whatever they do, we are going to be supportive. And that requires a certain code of behavior that you want to always try to strive towards. And if you can be striving towards that code of behavior, that's what's going to get you through all of these stressful events. You know what I mean? And then in order to do that, what's to achieve those goals, the second thing for me is mindfulness. You know, you have to be aware of yourself in a given moment. You have to be aware of the needs and the emotions of other people as well as yourself. You know what I mean? In order to be able to navigate those stressful moments. And so, Natalie, the point that I guess I want to make is what I help people to do is to understand a more enduring definition of how one defines oneself. Okay, something that won't change, and and that's what, like, you have a new North Star, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? To kind of guide you through these challenging moments when all about you, as that phrase go, you know, all about you is chaos and things are being upended.
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
And then also, of course, that I'm so sorry, that can extend also to how you want to treat yourself. You know, what kind of, you know, what's important to you in how you treat yourself. Let's talk about that. You know, is your physical body important to you? Well, guess what? The only thing you can do is treat it a certain way. Let that be a North Star, that I'll always be trying to treat myself in a certain way, no matter what happens. You know what? Even if your daughter, like mine did, tells you that your breasts look like two bed slippers, you can still go out and do, you know, that, say whatever you want, honey. I'm treating myself in a certain way nonetheless. You know what I mean? But that's a particular therapeutic model that it's called acceptance and commitment therapy, which is about accepting the things that you cannot change, but committing to a behavior code, committing to the things that are important to you nonetheless, and trying to just I try to give people interventions that can help them to commit to these behaviors no matter what is happening around you. So that's a long-winded explanation. I hope some of it landed.
No, it all landed, Sonia, without a doubt, because what I love about this is that when you talked about the attitude and wanting to show up, it's something that I speak about all the time, is how do you want to show up on this journey of menopause? That a lot of women feel it's there's only one way to show up. You're to be miserable and you have all the hot flashes and you complain, but But as you said, we all have the choice of how we want to show up. And it's a many-pronged approach as far as from therapy, you know, the mental part of it, the physical part of it, the hormones, the self-care and all of that. And that's the beautiful thing about this discussion, is that we all have options of, we don't need to, suffering is not necessary, you know? It's not. But
pain is I often say pain is something we don't have control over. Suffering is something we do have control over. But I do want it, something you said, Nikki, just jogged my memory. We do have a choice in how we show up, okay? But what is also true is that many women don't know how to access that choice. Okay.
Yes.
So I don't just say, honey, you have a choice in how you show up, you know, with your partner or your workplace or whatever. I say, let's define how you want to show up, and let me give you some skills to help you show up exactly in that way. Here's what you're gonna do. If your child has let you down and just disappointed you, but you want to be supported, here's what you have to do. Here are the mind games that you have to play with yourself. Okay, number one. Here are the physiological things you have to do, so that, etc., etc., etc. So it's very important to understand, if you go to a professional, they're going to give you tools so that you can make those choices.
Yep. Tools are the only way that you're going to get through this. And that's why we do what we do, is tools with a doctor about HRT, tools with you, Sonia, on what we can do.
Exactly.
Every one of us have access to tools. It's just for us to advocate for ourselves that we have that as an option.
For sure. And I think, again, that's about mindfulness too, kind of being mindful, aware that I'm going through this, being able to stand back and observe that, there are dramatic changes happening to me. And let me go find help,
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, all right, in the last couple of minutes, if anybody has any questions, please pop it in the chat so Sonia can share, what her perspective is. So before we close off, Sonia, what else would you like to share with us? Because then, of course, we could talk about this for another 2 hours, because there's so much on this topic. And we may have you back, I can tell you that. But what would you like to share with us for these ladies that are closing off now?
I think I also want to emphasize the power of a group of supportive sisters such as this. The power of social connection when you're in distress, when you're going through something that can be so scary and destabilizing, because, for all human beings, the sense of isolation in times of difficulty makes times of difficulty so much more acute, but to the extent that we can connect with other people around a common challenge, to the extent that we can share stories, ideas, best practices, that's a very, very profound tool.
Yeah, it is. It's the most amazing tool, is to having that support of women, to be able to share in everybody's experiences. We had a question in the chat. Somebody was asking, is there an end to menopause? How long does this roller coastering of emotions and anxiety and all of that, is there an end date to this?
Wow. For some women, and I don't know the statistics there, I'm going to check though. For some women, they do experience some of the physiological symptoms into their 80s and 90s. For some women, so the physiological symptoms can extend and change from one woman to the next. For some women, things stabilize and the insomnia, the hot flashes, etc., goes away. For some women, only one symptom goes away. For some women, they all stay. So it's a mixed bag. And I think the statistics would be useful for people to know what the probability is like. I just regret I don't have them I'm not aware of what they are, but it's certainly useful information to have. So you can have a sense of what the likelihood is for your story, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that makes sense. But I think going in, I mean, when you talk about going into the 80s, I think some women are probably like, oh my God. But
Mhm.
as you said, you know, if we start now and get the right tools and get on
Yes.
this journey the way we want to get on this journey, it won't seem like we're on it very long. That's the way
Exactly.
I look at it, because it becomes who you are, you
Exactly.
know.
Exactly.
How did yeah, but it's a good question, Anne-Marie, is how did our elders manage? You know what? I would hazard a guess, and Sonia can tell me because we're wrapping up time, is they didn't talk about it. No,
Yeah.
the elders,
They
they
didn't,
didn't talk
and
about
as a
it.
result, they didn't manage, you know.
They
They
didn't.
lived, they lived lives that were considerably suboptimal to what their
Yes.
lives could have been like, you know.
Absolutely.
And their mental health was affected. And the thing that makes me the most sad is how they saw themselves considerably depreciated over
Mhm.
time, and that's what breaks my heart, you know. So whatever
Yeah.
beauty, whatever joy they had, whatever made them wonderful people, it's like they became blind to it, blind to that, and that was lost to them. That's the heartbreaking story.
Yeah. Well, we get to choose that. We get to change that in doing exactly what we're doing by ladies, talk about it. Find your support groups. Sonia, I popped your information in the chat, but I'll also do it in the replay when I send out where they can find you. That there are options for us that we want support. We know to talk about it. Whatever it's a start, and
Yeah.
it's advocate for yourself, ladies. Absolutely.
And talk to your girl children and talk to your boy children, so that
children.
they understand that this
Yeah.
is part of the cycle of life, and that
Yeah.
you don't have to just accept the changes, that there are things, there are tools, you know.
For sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. This has been awesome. Sonia, I wish you all the best down in St. Elizabeth. I know you have a lot to do ahead of you. And Natalie, I know you were doing some great stuff as well. So thank you both for taking the time to jump in here and let's talk about this.
Thank
And we're
you,
going to do
Nikki.
another round of this.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this
Sonia.
opportunity to talk about this.
Definitely. All right, ladies. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.